Just here casually typing on my computer. Let me just plan my training on this physical calendar that was totally necessary and not just for video purposes. Yeah, oh man, so incredibly busy here at my office planning training as far ahead as May 2024 for some reason. What will I do? My gains will melt off. Nobody in the world has ever been as busy as I am.
Stop crying, Fatso. You're not that busy. I got you.
Minimum effective dose. How can it be minimum and effective? Cringe.
Don't worry. I will show you the way.
What is the least a trained individual needs in order to make meaningful strength gains? And the answer may surprise you. The concept of the minimum effective dose is something that we see in a lot of other fields, including fields like medicine. Essentially, what is the least amount of something that you can ingest, take, or do in order to get a response that is still meaningful? When it comes to training, people are interested in getting healthier, fitter, bigger, and stronger. So much like with anything else, there is a minimum effective dose of training that you can do so you can still get a meaningful response from your training. That means getting enough muscle growth for it to mean something, or getting strong enough for that strength increase to mean something. Here's where the problem lies. We are very closely attached to the word optimal. We're looking for the optimal training program, for the optimal recovery routine, for the optimal approach to nutrition, without really thinking about what optimal really means. So I'd like to take this chance to first go over the difference between meaningful and optimal. So when thinking about training, the average person that wants to look good, be strong, and be fit, they fail to understand is that the difference between meaningful and optimal may be a very small difference. People often tend to completely discount anything below optimal as zero. So unless you're doing the best exercise routine or doing the most optimal exercises with the most optimal form, people assume that you will not be making any meaningful gains. When in reality, you could be making the majority of your gains, and I'm talking about 60 to 80% of your potential gains with much less work than you'd need to get the optimal results. Now, I hear you asking, Pak, where did you get that t-shirt from? From Rascal Apparel. I'm not sponsored, but buy their stuff. But I also hear you asking, and I should really get that checked out. I keep hearing voices in my head asking me things at random. But I hear you asking, so why isn't everybody experimenting with the concept of the minimum dose? Well, the reality is that there's this sort of misconception that anything below optimal is not worth your time. And a lot of people fail to understand that the reality of things, and in this particular case, the science is there. And we have a lot of data, both on trained and untrained individuals, including high-level strength athletes, showing that you can indeed make a really solid amount of gains, make meaningful gains without spending too much time in the gym. Obviously, you're still going to be training hard, but doing much less than what many people will make you believe. Sure, it is suboptimal. I'm not going to sit here and argue or sell you that this is the best routine, as a lot of people try to do, and that's also part of the problem. You often see people trying to sell you very time-efficient workouts, routines, exercise programs, whatever, with the promise that this is the secret you've been missing. Unfortunately, the research doesn't necessarily reflect that, which then creates a bad rep around sort of minimum dose-based programs as they're marketed as optimal programs. And then people completely discount them, and that essentially backfires in them feeling like they have to commit a lot of time and put a lot of effort in their training in order to get any results. But the reality is much different. When it comes to improving your health, strength, and increasing your muscle mass, you can make substantial gains for relatively long periods of time, I'd say up to 4 months, without needing to increase that dose. After that point, you may need to do a bit more, with just a handful of sets per muscle group or per lift per week. By lift, I mean if you want to get strong on a particular exercise, you could perform a handful of sets on that exercise and just leave it at that. And vice versa. You want to work on your biceps, your back, your chest, a handful of sets performed very close to failure per week will do the trick. And keep in mind, we're not talking about a maintenance dose here. We're not talking about the least you can do to still maintain your muscle mass or see some sort of minimal increase over time. We're talking about an amount of training that you can do and still make actually significant, actually meaningful gains. It's important to clarify that this is not a method of training. This is not supposed to be a training approach that you take and utilize for the rest of your lives without making any adjustments to it. There will be different periods of time, and based on your previous experience, on how strong you are and what recovery resources you have available, your minimum effective dose may vary from week to week or from month to month. But the concept of the minimum effective dose, so seeing what's the least you can do and still make progress, is a concept that you can have with you and work on and experiment with for the rest of your life, especially during periods where you're unable to spend a lot of time in the gym. So let's say that you are faced with a very, very busy period at work, at university, or if you have had a kid. Taking the concept of the minimum effective dose and starting as low as a handful of sets per muscle group or per exercise per week can be a great way for you to get a psychological sort of relief that you can still get your training in. And this ties in really nicely with the idea that doing something is much better than nothing when it comes to resistance training. People have this idea that it's too good to be true, or it is not possible to just do a little bit and see great increases in strength and size and obviously general health and fitness, which unfortunately, or actually fortunately, is not based on any actual scientific evidence. For you to improve your health, see strength and muscle gains, and be able to still get your lift in and progress over time without stopping just because you're super busy, all you need to be doing is just a few sets per muscle group per lift per week. Maybe a total of like an hour of lifting per week will be more than enough for you to still be at it and still be making great gains. Not optimal gains, but still really solid gains, and definitely better gains than if you were to do absolutely nothing. Aside from periods where time is limited, you will also come across periods of time where you may have your usual time to train, but your recovery resources are heavily impacted, either by an increased amount of stress or by a change of focus in your life. You may be working on a project that is occupying a lot of mental space in your head, and you may not feel as enthusiastic about training as you did before. You may not be looking forward to those 2-hour sessions or completing a bunch of sets to failure if your goal is hypertrophy. This is where the concept of the minimum effective dose comes in play. You can always go, okay, I am not going to shoot for 100% gains. I'm going to settle for around 80% of my potential hypertrophy or strength gains, do much less overall volume, and still continue progressing, versus saying, you know what, I can't get 100%, so I'll just settle for 0%. And that's something I'm trying to get across to a lot of people. As a coach, I work with individuals of all professional and fitness backgrounds. Our default is not always to go and just do the least amount we can to get the most out of their training, because a lot of these people still want to achieve optimal strength and hypertrophy increases. But the concept of the minimum dose is always in the back of my mind whenever there are a few consecutive weeks where people are missing lifts or sessions, or when things are not feeling that great as far as overall training goes. Instead of feeling like you're missing out on sessions or you're missing out on sets, simply take a few steps back, do the least you need to do in order to make progress for both strength and hypertrophy, which again will be roughly around a handful of sets per muscle group or per lift per week. Give yourself a big tap on the back, and remember that it is truly enough for you to still make great gains. It may be suboptimal, but suboptimal does not mean that it won't be meaningful. This is not a concept for beginners to experiment with. This is not your hey, you want to just make a few gains and look okay, you could play around with this concept. This is a concept that applies to lifters of all experiences and levels, from novices or people that just want to get into lifting, all the way to really experienced elite strength or physique athletes. So, do not feel like this is something that is mostly catering to beginners or people that are not experienced lifters. An optimal training plan on paper is not optimal if you're not actually doing it. But a suboptimal training plan on paper, if it allows you to be in the gym for longer periods of time and actually consistently lift over the period of a year, will lead to much better gains than being in and out of the gym all the time. Do not forget to subscribe, notification bell icon, and to obviously donate to our charity, which is essentially myself, and it's not a charity, it's just my personal bank account. As always, I would appreciate if you just send me some money. If the tax people are listening, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. I don't know why I'm whispering. The microphone is here. I do pay my taxes, right? Peace.
My results. What if I'm not making...
All you Europeans.